Hello, this is meteorologist and storm chaser Gabe Garfield, and I wanted to give a weather briefing on the severe weather threat early this week. And wanted to start with the Storm Prediction Center's Day 3 severe thunderstorm outlook. As you can see here, the SPC has assessed the risk at slight, going from southern Missouri through Illinois to Indiana and to Michigan. And they've mentioned the threat of a few tornadoes, with the primary limiting factor being moisture, which is something that we have actually talked about the last couple of days. Then going to the latest GFS, let's start at 500 millibars. I want to back this up to see how the flow is evolving now. You can see it's still split around this time with the southern stream and a northern stream. Northern stream appears to be a little bit more vigorous. As time goes on, though, you can see shortwave trough and the Pacific Northwest begins to interact with the same and the southern stream, and then they come together over the central United States, and then it's very broad, fast flow develops over the upper Midwest. That will be associated with this particular event. And you can see in terms of timing, um, the flow over Illinois on Tuesday evening, which is the time in question, will be fast from the west, but not overly fast compared to what it'll be on Wednesday. So we're looking at probably 55 to 60 knots. Should be sufficient for pretty strong deep layer shear over that area. One thing I wanted to point out is just that this system is moving a little bit faster than we expected before. So if you look at the surface dew point temperature, you can see this pretty clearly in the fact that we do see some moisture return on Tuesday, but into Wednesday, you do see this strong cold front begin to take shape from central Texas to southern Arkansas to southern Indiana by Wednesday morning, and then you see that go through pretty much all of the South by midday on Wednesday. This is quite a bit different than what we saw before, where most of Arkansas and Mississippi and into Tennessee had broad warm sector conditions, um, meaning that there would be the possibility of a severe weather outbreak at that time. But it looks like it's going to be a little bit earlier, a little less organized. So I think Tuesday is going be the day for severe weather, so we'll focus on that in this discussion. So, in terms of the model forecast evolution, that is the GFS model evolution, you can see here surface dew points. Let's pause it and we'll back it up. You can see one of the older runs, it showed pretty high moisture contents in central Illinois. And then with time, you can see that the model started to drop that moisture content quite a bit and keep it mostly relegated to southern Illinois, which is where the latest runs of the GFS have that moisture. I will say, though, that in general, that doesn't mean that there's no chance of tornadoes. In fact, if you look at, let me go ahead and X out of this. If you look at a model sounding, I think this is the GFS yet, for 0Z in southern Illinois, and you put that up, you will see that even though the cape is a bit skinny there, you will see a surface dew point temperature of 61 Fahrenheit, 68 air temperature, pretty deep layer of moisture. Um, so that might get it done in terms of thermodynamics. Uh, 700 to 500 millibar lapse rates, not particularly impressive, but good enough to get the job done. You can see in terms of shear, you have these veered southwesterly surface winds. However, given the fact that the mid-level winds veer to almost due westerly, you actually do have fairly substantial directional shear, and you have some speed shear too. So you do see a pretty good hodograph shape up here that's kind of just turned a bit to a clockwise direction. And in terms of the surface to 1 kilometer or low level shear, storm relative velocity, you see 270, which is really strong. So definitely a chance of, I would say, strong tornadoes if the atmosphere plays her cards right. Obviously, the possible hazard type here being Tor. I do like the shape of this hodograph. You do see that kind of sickle shape. This is something that you look for tornadoes. do see a little bit of a weakness in the mid levels, which is not uncommon, and that should not preclude tornado risk. I think the primary problem that I'm seeing in some of these soundings, maybe not so much this one, is a possibility you might see some um, moisture mixing out. So that'll be something to look for. And then in the NAM, you see the moisture is actually a little bit different in terms of the way it's distributed. And then in the GFS, you do see moisture over most of Illinois. We're at 0Z on Wednesday, and you will see mostly dew points in the upper 50s here, which sounds on the low side, but if you take a forecast sounding here, it doesn't look terrible in terms of the thermodynamics. I will say that surface temperature does not look great here, but overall you see a little bit of Cape 500 to 1,000 joules per kilogram, which is admittedly pretty low Cape, but it is still February, so not terribly bad given climatology. LCLs are very low in this particular forecast sounding. Storm relative velocity over 300, so that is definitely what's making this entire setup good, is that strong shear, and not at all different from what you see with GFS in terms of the forecast photograph here for the NAM. So pretty similar story, kind of a little bit of a sickle shape, very good speed shear with the exception of the layer from say 3 to 5 kilometers as well. And then looking at the HER, we do see UH tracks updraft helicities are basically the combination of updraft and spin, and these essentially explicitly resolved storms. And you can see that they run from eastern Illinois through northern Indiana. And I think the conditions here could actually support tornadoes. And so this is actually, a fairly good sign that there is some real potential for tornadoes with this setup. We'll see how that evolves. Again, I think my primary concern is going to be for moisture, but let's look at the moisture right quick. In the HER, you can see this time this is 0Z on Wednesday, so basically Tuesday evening, and there's kind of like a little bit of a warm front type of deal where these UH tracks are set up along. And if you pull up a forecast sounding, still pretty unimpressive thermodynamics, but the kinematics here are very impressive. Surface to 1 kilometer of 530 meters squared per second squared. So overall, what you're seeing is high shear, low Cape day, pretty normal for February. So we'll see what happens. But thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.